For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Marcella Tillett. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Vice President of Programs and Partnerships at Brooklyn Community Foundation, and I'm really excited to be with you all this morning. If you have any issues with the sound, please put it in the chat. There's some background noise happening, but that's to be expected. We all know how Zoom gatherings go. So we are here for the application clinic for our Spark Prize, which is such an exciting time of year. We took a break in 2020, and so we didn't have 2021 winners, but we had 22 winners and we're back on track. So that's very exciting. I am flying solo today with no tech help. So I'm going to ask folks to use the Q&A function, and I'll pause momentarily to check to see if any questions have come in. But I'll kind of go through, put questions in the Q&A, and I'll kind of break it up to respond to them. So this session is being recorded, and actually this notice of recording is more for meetings, less for webinars. You can't be seen, so it's all good. The session is being recorded to ensure that folks who aren't able to attend are able to see this video to help them with their application. So it'll be on our website also for future reference for your own. So Brooklyn Community Foundation, many of you know us, but for those of you who don't, or perhaps you're just finding out about us, we are Brooklyn's Community Foundation, the first and only public foundation solely dedicated to Brooklyn's charitable community. We work with donors, we work with community leaders, we work with community members, and it's all about investing in racial justice and community-led change. We were founded in 2009, and since that time, we've provided over $75 million in grants to hundreds. I think it's probably over 400 nonprofits throughout the borough, those based in the borough, those serving the borough, all folks doing amazing work to contribute to the forward movement and equity and justice in Brooklyn. So we are on a mission to spark lasting social change, mobilizing people, capital, and expertise for a fair and just Brooklyn. That is who we are, and that is what we do, only through partnership with the amazing nonprofit community and the many organizations we have as partners. We're able to do this work. This manifesto, I don't know who the author was, but I believe it was written in the mid-2000s when we launched the Spark Prize, which launched in 2016. And I'm going to share this manifesto and I'm going to read it as a grounding to what we're doing and why we're here and why this prize is so important. Here's to the change makers, the catalysts, the igniters, those who never say never. Here's to celebrating what works here in Brooklyn and to great ideas that started here in Brooklyn. Here's to creating solutions together that harness the diversity, courage, and creativity of 3 million people across 70 neighborhoods. Brooklyn is more than New York City's largest borough. With urban farms and community gardens, performance halls and street parades, murals and museums, mosques and temples, brownstones and boardwalks, it is the proudest and the boldest. From Bay Ridge to Brownsville, Gravesend to Greenpoint, Brooklyn is and always has been home to the most electric doers, artists, activists, advocates, educators, innovators, and trailblazers anywhere, from everywhere. You are the spark that lights up Brooklyn for all the world to see, a spark that starts movements, kindles collaboration, incites bold new ideas. This is your moment to share the hurdles you've overcome, the justice you've won, and the future you envision. This is your moment to show how community can come together to lead Brooklyn forward. This is your moment to shine. I love reading that manifesto. I read it every time I get the chance because it is exciting. It is a reflection of why we have this prize. I think this is a reflection of how Brooklyn Community Foundation feels about the amazing partners we have and will have that are doing incredible work in Brooklyn. And this is what we hope to see throughout the Spark Prize process, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But I hope you all enjoyed that. I hope it gives you a tingle down your spine, which it does for me, because we really are talking about all of Brooklyn, and we are talking about the change makers and the people pushing us forward, who are many of you on this webinar. So Spark Prize is an extension, right, of Brooklyn Community Foundation's standard grant making. And we have a set of Brooklyn Community Foundation values, but we also have a particular set of Spark Prize values, which are really important to remember because the Spark Prize Committee, who are the reviewers and the participatory grant making body that selects the winners, these are the elements that they are judging applications and interviews on, right? So this is the set of values that we ground them in, and we ask them to use as a filter, a lens to assess the applications. So the first is Born in Brooklyn. Organizations that have a deep history in Brooklyn and a continued commitment to serving the borough. This is not restricted to only organizations that were founded in Brooklyn. No, if you are serving Brooklyn, if you have a deep history in Brooklyn, that's the key part, deep history. We know what commercial space costs in Brooklyn. We know that it's not always possible to base your organizations in Brooklyn or have your offices here, but you have to be able to demonstrate and show that deep history and that deep work and commitment in Brooklyn, community level, right? Even borough-wide, like that's what we want to see. Commitment to equity is next. Organizations that address systemic challenges and advance racial and social justice for all Brooklynites. Our racial justice commitment is core to all of our work. So we definitely prioritize that in the Spark Prize. And we want to see that articulated. That isn't restricted to advocacy and organizing work, right? That's might be the most direct example folks might think of, but doing social and racial justice work and having deep reflections of equity in how you do your work can exist in all types of organizations. So it's really important that you demonstrate that and show that in your application. You're able to articulate that and describe it in a way that is clear to folks that are reviewing. The next is values-driven organizations that have articulated values that permeate through all aspects of their work. We want to know what you're doing and why you're doing it, what's driving your work. We definitely want to see if it is a community-driven work, community-informed work. That should be demonstrated in your application. That should be clear when expressing the work of your organization. And then vision for the future. Organizations that have a strong vision for the future work of their organization, organizations that have a strong vision for the future of their work in Brooklyn and beyond. It's a typo, that's why I got stumped. The vision for the future is also important because the Spark Prize is $100,000 of general operating support for winners to use however they see fit. You want to get the reviewers excited about how you might use that money. And it doesn't have to be so specific to $100,000 equals X, staff person or X project, but build that into where you're going as an organization. How would this help? What vision do you see for your corner of Brooklyn? Or if you're doing borough-wide, what impact would this have on Brooklyn as an extension of your work? We want to see where you all are going as organizations and how Spark will help you get there. Just a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A and I'll check on those in a moment. BCF's racial justice lens. If you've applied for BCF funding in the past, you are probably very familiar with this language. We define racial justice as the systemic redistribution of power, opportunities, and access for people of all races. We believe that all people should be equally seen, heard, valued, and respected. So we want to see that, that is how we prioritize. And again, this is how we're looking at the work of organizations that are applying. We aim to increase the ability of Black, Indigenous, and people of color to determine and sustain a more equitable future for themselves and their communities. Again, those are our priorities. That's what we're looking for in the organization applications that we're reviewing. For us as an institution, our grant making demonstrates our racial justice lens by giving priority to organizations led by members of affected communities and organizations that center the voices of those directly impacted by structural racism in decision-making. I'm going to, okay, I see a couple of questions. Matt, can you pop that question into the Q&A just so it doesn't get lost in the chat? And I'll answer it in just a moment. More about our racial justice lens and how it comes up in the review of proposals. We give priority to organizations that use a racial justice lens in their work. They consider inequities based on race, an intersectional lens, intersectional racial justice lens. So it's race, it's gender, it's ability, it's immigration status. We want to see how that analysis shows up in how you all conceptualize and implement the work that you're doing. We want to see it in the design. We want to see it in how you're looking for solutions and defining your success. We give preference to organizations that center the voices and leadership of community members. We want to see that collaboration. We want to see that power shifting, right? And if you're doing that in your organization, be sure to articulate that clearly in the application. Now, there's a word count on the application, so you got to be really clear and concise, but you want to get this piece in there because it's very important. This information is on the website for the page for the Spark Prize, so you'll have time to reflect on this, but I really want to emphasize this point of that shared decision-making power and leadership of community members that are directly affected by the issues that your organizations are working on. As I mentioned before, we want to see acknowledgement of intersecting oppressions. And we give priority to organizations that are working on the front lines of issues in whatever way that looks, right? We want folks that are grassroots organizations doing the work on the ground at the community level. That is who we prioritize. Now, it's not restricted to grassroots organizations, but if that is the origin story of your work or the current kind of iteration and existence of your work, it is good to emphasize that and make that clear. So the Spark Prize, again, what is it? We have the Spark Prize to provide support to organizations that have a strong record of effectively addressing challenges that overwhelm communities of color in Brooklyn. And there are kind of two phases or two sets of prizes. And I'll go through the timeline later to make it clear how this kind of the different steps. So the first step is to identify the finalists, of which there will be 20. Those finalists will each win a $5,000 matching grant to be used as part of our Brooklyn Gives Giving Tuesday campaign. Brooklyn Gives is Brooklyn Community Foundation's Giving Tuesday platform. We use the GiveGab platform. It is free to everyone, every organization that wants to use it. We provide special training to Spark Prize finalists on how to maximize the use of the platform. And we provide $5,000 in matching grants for the Giving Tuesday, not just that day, but there's a period of time up till that day. Well, we extend past that day for finalists, but the culmination and the robust fundraising really takes place on Giving Tuesday, but the platform opens in early November and it's open through the end of December. And we give tips in our training on how to use the platform, tips on how to leverage and maximize a matching grant and how you might be able to use it in your own fundraising. So it's very valuable. It's a matching grant as well as some capacity building around fundraising. And so from the 20 finalists, 5 winners will be chosen, and those winners will receive a $100,000 unrestricted grant to be distributed over a 2 to 3 year period. And the reason it's 2 to 3 years is because the winners determine how they want the prize distributed. You can get $30,000 on the first year, $30,000 on the second year, $40,000 on the third year. You can do $30,000 on the first year, $70,000 on the second year, $70,000 on the first year, whatever combination makes sense for your organization and what you need to do with the money. And the limit of distribution per year is $70,000 of the $100,000. So it can go over 2 years or over 3 years. It's up to the winner. Eligibility requirements. Again, this is on the website, but we'll restate it here. And if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. You have to have been in operation as an organization for longer than 5 years. You have to show a minimum organizational budget of $200,000 in the most recent fiscal year, be an eligible 501c3 organization, and have an active governing body. Now, a question that often comes up around being in operation for longer than 5 years and being an eligible 501c3 organization, if you have been in existence for longer than 5 years, but you had a fiscal sponsor and your 501c3 is maybe 2 years old, you are still eligible because the operation of your organization, even with a fiscal sponsor, is longer than 5 years. That's a question that comes up a lot, so I want to make that clear. Another question that comes up is this only for previous BCF grantee partners? Absolutely not. This is for all organizations that fit the criteria. Something that's really exciting about Spark Prize is, as a foundation, we have portfolios and we have focus areas. And the Spark Prize allows us to grant dollars across any sector, any area of work. It's not restricted to the portfolios and the funds that we currently have. So whether you've been a BCF grantee in the past or not, it does not matter. We encourage everyone to apply. The next piece to emphasize is whether organizations that have applied for the Spark Prize in the past are able to apply again. Absolutely. Unless you are a Spark Prize winner, you can only win once. You can be a finalist many times. So if you've applied in the past, you've gotten to the finalist stage, we encourage you to apply again. We have winners even this year. For example, Black Women's Blueprint is one of our winners for 2020. They have been a finalist in the past. Groundswell Community Mural Project, one of our winners for 2022, has been a finalist in the past. Each committee of reviewers is different each year, right? There are different things happening each year. There are all these elements that impact the review process. So definitely apply if you've applied in the past. Unless you've won, you're eligible to be considered again. And the timeline. So I think after this, I'm pretty close to taking questions and we're good on time. So the application opens April 25th. Today we're having the application clinic. Applications are due June 24th at 5 p.m. Please get in there early, get those applications done, because if you have an issue with the application and you need support, you don't want to wait till June 24th to try to get it, because that is a Friday and we close at 1 on Fridays. So don't wait till June 24th. Our Spark Prize Committee is announced this month. Now, to explain, I've talked about the group of reviewers that make the decisions about the Spark Prize. That is our Spark Prize Committee. Our Spark Prize Committee is comprised of 35 Brooklynites who are nonprofit leaders, business owners and leaders, leaders from the nonprofit, public, and private sectors. They're BCF donors. We also have one representative from each of our community advisory councils, which participates in the participatory grant making process for each one of our funds. So we have all of these folks who come together. They're trained by the programs team in our grant making process, and they conduct the application reviews. They conduct the interviews for finalists, and they score them, and it is a fully participatory process. And you'll get to see who those individual people are, but that's a general description of who typically is on the committee. During July through October, the applications are reviewed by the committee. In October, the 20 finalists are announced. As I mentioned, the finalists will win a $5,000 matching grant. In late October, we'll bring the finalists together to talk about that matching grant and to get trained on the Brooklyn Gives platform. For a 3-week period in November into early December, November 7th through December 2nd, we have the finalists interviews. We also provide, and this is something new this year, and this came as feedback from prior finalists, we'll be providing some, it's not coaching, but like an information session in preparation for the interviews. So finalists understand how they can use that time, who they can bring, the structure of the interview, and they really feel prepared and confident coming into that space. November 29th is Brooklyn Gives. That's Giving Tuesday. And it's really fun. Even if you don't become a finalist, sign up for the platform. It's really great. I saw some people, Jennifer in the chat talked about how fabulous Brooklyn Gives is. Thank you. We encourage you to use it. A lot of organizations find new donors. And it's great. We give prizes on Giving Tuesday. We give door prizes for, whoever earned the most between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m., those kinds of things. It's a lot of fun. So please keep an eye out for the Brooklyn Gives campaign, whether you're a finalist or not, but especially if you're a finalist, you want to use that opportunity to fundraise. We have one final decision-making convening of the committee after the interviews, and that happens in December, and that's when the finalists, the winners are chosen. And then the 5 Spark Prize winners are announced in January of 2023. And then in February of 2023, we'll have the Spark Breakfast, which is amazing. If you've ever been, you know that it is just an exciting and magical event. We get to celebrate the work of our 5 winners, and it's a beautiful time, and there's speeches, and there's just it's a wonderful space that centers nonprofit work. It centers the work happening in Brooklyn. So it's a great event to attend, especially if you're a winner and you're being honored. Our past winners, I hope you can see this. Our past winners, our most recent winners are Arab American Association of New York for this year, Black Women's Blueprint, Brooklyn Movement Center, Groundswell Community Mural Project, Weeksville Heritage Site. Those are our 2022 winners. And you'll see here our 2020, 2019, 2018, and 2017 winners. Something to notice, and why I always put up this list, is the range of organizations, both in size, in length of time they've existed, the sector and type of work they do. This is a real cross-section of the Brooklyn nonprofit community. So I hope you see this and are encouraged and can see your own organization hopefully being on that list for our 2023 winners. Okay, so with that, I am going to go to questions. This is a great question. We are a charter school and have a 501c3 determination letter. Are we eligible to apply? All 501c3s are eligible to apply. Quick question. I know you covered this, but just to confirm, would a citywide organization with a strong commitment to and foothold in Brooklyn and Brooklyn-specific programs be eligible to apply? Absolutely. That Born in Brooklyn focus, that value, if you meet that deep history and commitment to serving the borough, you are encouraged and absolutely eligible to apply. Next question. Could you apply for this if you've already applied for the Brooklyn Community Fund Youth Grant? Absolutely. We have had, so I shared that being a BCF grantee, like this prize isn't only eligible to Brooklyn Community Foundation, current community partners or applicants, but it is eligible for them. So if you happen to get an Invest in Youth grant, that has no bearing on whether you get a Spark Prize. They're 2 separate processes. One doesn't get you more points or fewer points or moved out of the process for the other. And I'll just share, our current and recent grantee partners have shown up in different spaces. So be encouraged by that, hopefully. But all of these winners are not, and were not at the time, current grantee partners. I hope that's clear. If you are an organization working with grassroots organizations to address their internal challenges, would that preclude us from applying? if you are an organization working with grassroots organizations to address their internal challenges, would that preclude us from applying? Christine, can you give more information on that? It sounds like you're maybe a capacity building provider. What I'll say to that is if the organization itself is a 501c3, you are eligible to apply. Yes, you are a capacity building provider. Yes, you're eligible to apply. And you know what's interesting? I think, yes, you're not grassroots, but you work with grassroots organizations. I encourage you to apply. I think organizations such as the one you're describing don't typically see themselves as being relevant in this kind of process, but I think it's all in how you articulate your work, right? What values drive your work? How do you work with partners? How do you center their voices? What communities do you focus on, right? Talk about that in your work. And you're absolutely eligible to apply. Remember that born in Brooklyn, that deep Brooklyn commitment has to be there as well. Melissa's question, how can we indicate intersectionality in organization focus and sub-focus drop down? None of the categories on their own are good fits. Yeah, so the drop downs on the application, they're not exhaustive, right? They're going to be organizations that don't quite see themselves in those drop down selections. So I would choose whatever's closest and then clarify in the comment. That would be the best we can do. Oops. I have to just clean this up. The ones I've already answered, there's a few more. The most recent fiscal year, is that the one passed or the one we're currently in? It's the one that has recently passed. So your annual budget for your most recently closed fiscal year, that's what we want to know. And that's what determines your eligibility. The requirement is $200,000 for your most recent fiscal year. So that would be the most recently closed fiscal year. And that depends on whatever your fiscal year is. It might be a calendar year, it might be a July 1. It's specific to your organization. So that's why we say fiscal year, not calendar year. By minimum organizational budget of $200,000, do you mean revenues or expenses? Do you mean revenues? The application asks for information about both a board and a senior leadership team. As a fiscally sponsored organization, we have a leadership team and made a decision to not have a board. Do we need to submit information about the board to our fiscal sponsor? Hold on, I need to read that one again. The application asks for information about both a board and a senior leadership team. As a fiscally sponsored organization, we have a leadership team and made a decision to not have a board. Do we need to submit information about the board? Oh, I got it, of our fiscal sponsor. That's a good question. I would say to include the board. Okay, so the board of your fiscal sponsor is not the governing body of your organization. So I would not include them. Thank you, Sally. I'm like thinking this through out loud. Thank you all for your patience. What I would recommend is to leave the board questions blank and explain why it's blank, right? Just as you wrote, you made a decision not to have a board. I know there's a word count, very concisely, just state why you've made that decision, like what values that's resting on. If there is, and I can't remember, but if that's a required field to complete the board questions or the numbers in those boards, put 0. And if it doesn't accept 0, contact the there's like a help address that you can email, and our grants manager will kind of figure out how to make that adjustment for your application. But just try to put in 0 for the board questions where it asks you how many board members and what their demographics are. I hope that's clear. You're welcome. Our budget last year was 180,000. Does that automatically reject us? I'm so sorry. I'm not going to say reject. I'm going to say it encourages you to apply next year. And hopefully your budget continues to grow and your work continues to grow. If you want your budget to grow, hopefully it does. But you would not be eligible this year. But you're only 20K short. So I feel very confident that you'd be eligible to apply next year. Okay, I believe I've answered all of the questions. I'm just gonna do a quick review in the chat to see if there are any questions lingering there. While I do that, I encourage you, if you have any last minute burning questions, to put those in the Q&A box. Okay, I see a question in the chat. In the application questions where you ask about demographics of population served, can we indicate each demographic category if we have even one individual who identifies that way? Or are you looking to know who we predominantly serve? Thank you for that question. We're looking to know who you predominantly serve. Who are your services in? Well, not intended for, because they might be generally intended, but if you center a population in your services, that's what we want to see. It isn't helpful to say, we serve everybody. And when there's like, oh, there's one person here, one person there, one person there that identifies as these other identities, but your programming isn't really centering them in any way. So yeah, talk about who you predominantly serve. What community are you serving? That's what we really want to know. It says my organization serves a wide swath of public high school and college students who identify in a multitude of ways and check a lot of these boxes. Is it helpful to give you a vision of who we are by checking every single box that applies to any of our students? Again, go with where there's like a concentration in terms of these different identities. Who's showing up in your services? Who are you actually serving? Okay, hope that's helpful. Can you only be nonprofit and still apply? If not, how long do you have to be established as a 501c3 before applying? You have to have been in existence, in operation for longer than 5 years. That's the requirement. If you have been in operation for longer than 5 years and let's say 4 of those years was with a fiscal sponsor and you just recently got your 501c3, you're still eligible because as an organization, you've been in operation for longer than 5 years. Approximately how many proposals does this grant opportunity normally receive? A lot, let me tell you. These are a lot of reviews that have to be done. I think last year we received, I want to say somewhere between 175 and 200. I should know that number, but I don't have it at the ready. But it's quite a few. It's a pretty competitive process. It receives the most applications of any of our portfolios because it is so general. You don't have to provide services in a particular sector or particular in a particular way using a particular strategy. So we receive a lot of applications. What does being rooted in Brooklyn mean? Any advice on how to talk about that? Gina, that's a great question. I'll give examples of how we've seen it talked about. We've seen organizations talk about like the motivation for the founding of the organization, who has run the organization, where the organization has been based, the community partners that the organization has, and how it has been located, not just geographically, but really in community with a neighborhood, a set of neighborhoods, a geographic community, a demographic or geographic community in Brooklyn. So we've seen it talked about in a number of different ways. What I would say in terms of advice is talk about it in the way that's most true to the organization. And it could be valuable if you want some insight into how that lives in your organization, ask people in the organization, right? How would you say we're rooted in Brooklyn? What does that mean to you? Ask folks around the table, ask, the community advisors or community members that are close to the organization and contributed to the organization. They might help you figure out how to articulate that. Next question. We are a very large organization, annual operating budget, 250 million. We do also serve Queens, the Bronx, and Nassau and Suffolk on Long Island, but a large portion of our services are in Brooklyn. Are we eligible? Yes, you are, Judy. For the minimum budget requirement, do we go off the current budget or the most recently completed fiscal year actuals? You go off the most recently completed fiscal year actuals. Lorraine, that's the answer. Okay, we have more questions in the Q&A. When will the recording become available on the website? Give me until Thursday. The recording will come into my inbox. I'll send it to our comms team, and they're pretty quick about putting these things up. Excuse me. Do you have the data on average operating budget of a Spark Prize recipient? That's a good question. Of our 2022 winners, I would say the average budget size is probably around $2 million. All of the 2022 winners are pretty established organizations. I would say between $2 and $3 million. But when we look at 2020, that would drop probably to about $1 million. So it really varies. It really varies. But that's a great question. I'll keep that in mind. Hi, you list that the finalists participate in a matching prize and the winners get an unrestricted prize. Are the finalist funds restricted? Great question. No, they are not. The matching grant can be used on whatever you like. Thank you for that question. Are the finalists interested in how the prize will be used? I think you mean, are the committee members interested in how the prize will be used, like the reviewers? Yes, they are. That tends to come out more so in the interviews, because that's often a question that's asked during the interviews. If you were to win this prize, how would you use it? I encourage organizations in responding to this vision for the future value to include how this prize might be helpful in that, in the application. And, if you become a finalist, you would likely be asked that question directly in the interview. What does being rooted in Brooklyn mean? I answered that one. Thank you. Our organization is a national organization with chapters in several states. However, our Brooklyn location has not been in operation for 5 years yet. Ooh, this is a great question. Are we eligible to apply? That is a very good question. Yes, you are eligible. Technically, you are eligible. The deep history and commitment to Brooklyn sounds like it would be lacking. So that is my response. I would encourage you to, of course, continue the work you're doing in Brooklyn and continue to seek out Spark Prize as a possible option for you. But yes, technically you are eligible. Let's see. Okay, I think we got all the questions. I'm going to hold to see if any others come in. Fast fingers. Here are a couple more. Is priority given to Brooklyn, to organizations that have offices in Brooklyn? No. no. Priority is not given to organizations that have physical offices in Brooklyn. Your work needs to be in Brooklyn. And I think we had a couple of years ago, I think we had pretty deep conversation about that. And I mentioned this pretty quickly earlier in the webinar, but we had to have really transparent conversations about the impact of not just displacement of people in Brooklyn, but displacement of organizations in Brooklyn, and the difficulty of getting commercial space. That's kind of in flux, but it's a real challenge. So we know that there are organizations who have been priced out, who've had to move. So that's not something that we would hold against an organization if they're still able to do that deep Brooklyn, community level work, and their office or their administrative office just happens to be somewhere else. They may have partners where they co-locate services. There are all sorts of things that organizations can do. Many of you on here I know are doing that. Those are the examples that I'm using. Jed, thank you. And thank you to everyone who has found this useful and have given me positive feedback. I appreciate that. I'm going to hold the room just for a couple more minutes. Thank you all. I am so excited about Spark this year. The programs team, we get to review and score all of the applications alongside the committee. So I get to read the applications, and the work is so inspiring and it's so important. So to all of you who are in the room while I wait on more questions, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's been a very difficult, few years on top of difficult years, right? And you all continue to inspire and really hold community and serve as not just the safety net, but the core of so much that happens in our communities and different neighborhoods. And I deeply want to say thank you on behalf of the Foundation for the work and the partnership you've had with us over the years. I think that is the end of the questions. This will be up on the website this week. And shout out to all the images from our past Spark Prize winners. I am going to stay on the line just for a second because I want to save your questions and save the chat. You had some really smart, useful questions that I want to make sure we include on the, them on the frequently asked questions. Some of these questions we have never seen before. But if you leave, that is okay. I'm just trying to figure out how to save these questions. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day. And thank you for being in partnership and applying for Brooklyn Community Foundation funding.